You are watching Live Here in Nigeria.
To talk about handling objections, and I don't know if it's different for men and women. I think it may be. I think for women, I'm generalizing here, of course, but I think for a lot of women, I'm thinking back to how I would respond. You know, we would get the objections and kind of freeze up, right? And feel nervous and uncomfortable and not know what to say, or perhaps feel like we have to get into convincing mode and get really adversarial with people. And there's a very elegant way to handle objections that can make you feel at ease, make your prospects feel at ease, and actually answer the questions that they have, because objections are just questions in disguise. Their concerns are questions in disguise. And Richard, you've done, I think, about the best training I've ever seen on handling objections. Erica, can we make sure that goes out in the chat roll? There's we're not going to have time to go through the entire presentation, but he has a slide deck that you can all download. We'll make sure you guys get the link too. Those of you watching at home, be sure you get this link and go check out his slides. That'll basically walk you through this entire process in detail. This is a training worth having. But I was going to have you just, in summary, go through the handling objection philosophy that you teach, and you know, the steps, if you can, in just general.
Good. Well, it's kind of a continuation of what I talked about earlier today. I want to say something in front of it that might be helpful around follow-up. You invite people, you have yeses, you have nos, and you have maybes. And the maybes actually can equal the nos, maybe even outnumber the nos. And what I found is when I'm interviewing and coaching sales leaders about their follow-up and their process, the maybes really are sucking energy from the sales leaders.
Yes.
It's the maybes that the distributor is like grinding over, they're worrying over, they're fretting over, they're like, yeah, and part of it is hope, you know, it's one of my least favorite words, hope. It's just not a popular position. No, hope is not a strategy, and it's not an empowering place to come from unless you're shipwrecked on a deserted island, or you're, you know, earning $1 a day in Africa. Hope is a good thing there. But here in business, you know, hope is not a good thing. Hope just really drains your energy. So what I encourage people to do is move people as quickly as possible out of the maybe zone into a yes or a no. And most of them are going to go to no. And you'll really free up for yourself a lot of energy if you'll give people permission to say no. What they're telling you is maybe, partly because they're afraid to tell you no. Mm-hmm. And so if you just give people permission, like no is okay. It's okay if this isn't right for you. I really, really want to move you into the no column. Because maybes suck the life out of me. I don't want any hope. I either want yeses or nos. I don't want any hope. So that being said, the system is called listening through objections. As you can expect, I'm kind of big on listening. And step one, which I kind of talked about earlier, is when you hear an objection, just pay attention to your physiology. Just notice how when you hear an objection, notice what your body does. For most of us, it tenses up, it recoils, and we go into defense mode. And that's going to be then reflected in your conversation. So the first shift in this process is through vision and affirmations and retraining yourself, start visualizing yourself to embrace objections. If you're a rational person, once again, embrace them by, if there are no objections, you're all terminated. We don't need you anymore if there are no objections. It's what you get paid for. And so learn to embrace the objection. It's where you're going to have an opportunity to serve people. So that's an attitude thing, it's a physiological thing, but it's an energy thing, but it's really, really important. Because if you're in defense mode, people are going to push back. So usually I like to do this demonstration with a man, but I'll take a cop instead. So if you push people, just notice how they push back. Okay, so push me now.
I was.
Now push. See, you don't have to push back, but it's just it's the natural reaction to push back. So when a prospect tells you, I don't have time, and your response is something like, sure you do. If you, if you sleep 8 hours a day and work 8 hours a day, you got 72 hours a week free time. What are you doing with it? That doesn't give the prospect any more time. All it does is irritate them, and they're just going to dig in and push back. So embrace the objection. Step 2 is define the objection. Now, this may sound, may be academic for most objections, maybe academic for you, but I find it to be useful because we don't know exactly what the prospect means by whatever their objection is. For example, if a prospect says, I think it's a pyramid scheme, which we don't hear that very much, but if they do, that could mean several different things from their point of view. One, it could mean that they think it's illegal. So some people's definition of a pyramid scheme is it's illegal. They don't want to go to jail. That's why they're saying no. Some people's definition of a pyramid scheme is that it is, from a practical standpoint, from a fundamental standpoint, it just doesn't work. It can't last. So the model doesn't work. And they don't want to waste their time. Does that make sense? Some people define a pyramid scheme as immoral. Like they don't want to take advantage of people. So if you're going to respond to the objection, don't you think it'd be a good idea if you know what they meant by pyramid scheme? Somebody says, I don't have the money. Well, if you haven't told them how much money it costs yet, you might want to ask them, how much money are you thinking it's going to take? Or maybe they say, I don't have time. You might want to ask them, how much time are you imagining it's going to take? So anyway, the second step is to define the objection. The third, you might find counterintuitive, but it's magical in connecting with people and building rapport and relatedness. And that is, take their side and embellish the objection. So if somebody says to you, I don't have time, what's really going on in their life, do you think? Like you say, I got this business opportunity, it's really amazing. We go to all these places, we have all these meetings, we make all this money, everybody's wonderful. And somebody says, I don't have time. What do you sense is really going on in their life? Overwhelm, perhaps? So instead of saying, well, it doesn't take very much time, you can do this, but as a network marketer, we do this while we're doing everything else. Why, do you go to the movies and do you go to a restaurant and you tell people about it? We just network every day in every way and it doesn't take very time at all. The problem with that response is the prospect is still in overwhelm. Doesn't help them. Your creative BS story about network marketing doesn't help them. What would help them is for them to get that you get them. Boom, magic happens. So somebody says, I don't have time. You might say, wow, so you got a lot going on? What's he or she going to say? Have I got a lot going on? Well, tell me about it. What's going on? Oh my gosh. And then they tell you about everything that's going on. And so then what you want to do in the embellish phase is actually listen and speak back to them in a more articulate way than they spoke the objection to you, their objection. So it sounds like you can't even keep up with what's going on in your life now. It sounds like when you get home, you're just exhausted. Sounds like you can't even keep up with the kids. Sounds like dinner is no longer fun preparing for your family. It's like one more thing, and then you got the laundry, and then you're going to work too the next morning, right? Oh my God, does this man who has the female side get me? Because you do get them. And so you can keep the embellishment phase up, which is just getting people and helping them express their frustration or their fear. If they say it's a pyramid scheme, say, what do you mean by that? Well, those things don't work. Well, what do you mean don't work? Like, well, those things, I might spend 4 or 5 years and then the whole thing's going to fall apart. So what I hear you saying is you don't want to waste your time. You're right. I don't want to waste my time. So that's just embellishing. And in the embellishing phase, you keep the embellishment up until, doesn't always happen, but you'll be amazed at how often it happens. The next step is purging, not the objection, but the energy behind the objection. And the energy behind the objection is almost always fear or frustration. So you just keep embellishing the objection until your prospect lets go of that fear or frustration. And they do that when they get it, that you get them. They get off it. Now sometimes they'll come up with another one, like whack-a-mole. So you get them about how busy they are, but then they'll say, well, I don't have any money. And so you just go through the same process again. Just listen through the objection. It's the Tai Chi approach. Whatever people's objection is, don't push back, don't argue, don't make them wrong. Get them. And get them until they get off it. And when people get off it, then you can ask their permission to address it, which might sound as simple as, I get it. You don't have any time. And the last thing you want to do is add some overwhelm to your life. Why would you do that? Yeah, okay. So let me ask you this. If you could prove to yourself how you could work it in somehow, if you could prove it to yourself that you could work it in and make an extra $1,000 a month, would you at least look? Now, you can't ask that question when somebody is fearful or frustrated. But you can ask that question when they believe you get them and they've let go. Simple as that. Listening through objections.
It's brilliant. I think it works well for anybody, but I would assume for women especially, knowing how emotional we are and how much angst would come up when we're being asked to make a decision and we're feeling overwhelmed and there's just no way for us to do it. To have that happen, to have someone really listen and appreciate and honor how we're feeling, just that in and of itself would create so much natural rapport. I could see how just easily people's guard would come down and they would at least have some level of interest at that point to look further. Thank you for that, sir. It was lovely.